Hey everyone, geophysicist Stefan Burns here. We are right now at the beginning of a big wave of solar activity, and I don't know when this is going to end, but this could continue all the way through the end of 2025. We are seeing a ton of new sunspots explode on the sun. Right now, sunspot numbers are 190 after having bottomed out very low. They are rising rapidly. Solar flux is at 173 after bottoming out. It is rising extremely fast, and that is because of these sunspots here rotating from the eastern limb onto the Earth-facing side. Specifically, 4197 right here is the big flare player, but as you can see, there's plenty of activity also from 4199. There are some other active regions scattered in between them as well, and 4197 has a beta gamma delta magnetic field configuration, meaning it is very unstable and could launch out some big flares as it continues to grow. I think it's basically still a baby, maybe a juvenile now, but it's actively growing at this moment in time and quite rapidly. Just today had a 4.5 M-class flare that did launch some plasma out into space. Boom, there it was. And before that, there was a 3.3 M-class flare, and then there was also a 4.5 M-class flare on the 25th of August. So we've had some moderate M-class flares from these regions. Now they're rotating towards Earth, center, and direct. We have about 12 days, 14 days of heightened activity from these sunspot groups. We'll have to continue to wait to see what is also going to rotate in after them. But this is all coming in as interstellar object 3I Atlas gets closer and closer to the sun. And we are right now in an S1 proton radiation storm because of that huge explosion that occurred on the far side of the sun, launched out towards Mars and 3I Atlas. And now these protons are peppering the Earth. Keep in mind, the position of the Earth relative to that explosion was definitely not conducive to receiving these protons. They had to cut across the solar wind. Whereas Mars and 3I Atlas definitely got bombarded to a much greater degree. So 3I Atlas is going to continue ionizing and plasmifying as it gets closer to the sun. It has a very CO2 rich dominant coma. Of course, there's a lot of dust grains in there, and there's also water, methane, some other cocktail ingredients you could say, but it is a dusty plasma cloud. And as a result, it is interacting with the electromagnetic circuit of the solar system. And so I think it is provoking this solar activity, and at the same time, I think the sun is choosing to blast off these big flares to wake 3I Atlas up out of its deep interstellar slumber, where it was pretty low in ionization because the overall flux rate in interstellar space is quite low as it is compared to being within the heliosphere. So we have a lot to talk about today. The sun is effectively microwaving us, causing a lot of thermal expansion on the Earth. That is another story that very few people, if any, are reporting on. Let's get right into it. Let's look at our sunspot continuum because we can see the huge increase in sunspots and growth from 4197 right there. This is 4191 up top. It has a very large core. That's a big sunspot group. Hasn't been that active. Here we have 4199, but 4197 by far is the big flare player. As you can see, it is still growing rapidly. There has been a spreading apart of these two clusters there. That is common as the flux lobe pushes out from the sun. We'll have to wait and see if any sunspots fill in those intermediate middle regions, or if it starts to maybe create a larger cluster with these other tiny sunspots nearby. But this is a big sunspot. It is still about 5 days away from Earth, center, and direct, and it's probably going to continue flaring. I think we are going to get some X-class flares from this, at least one. We'll just have to wait and see, but we do have Mercury Cazimi coming up on September 13th, and we typically see elevated solar flare activity during the superior conjunctions of Mercury. Let's give that record a look. Here we have our application solar system scope to see the position of the planets and their respective distance away from the sun, though the size of these objects are not to scale. But here we see a Mercury Cazimi, a superior conjunction of Mercury on October 1st, 2024. And there was a lot of solar activity back then, as some of you may recall. So this is an Earth, Sun, Mercury alignment. That's a superior conjunction with the sun. An inferior conjunction is where it's on the inside like we see here in December, but let's go back. And well, that was around October 1st. We had a 7.0 X-class flare on October 1st, and then there was also a 9.0 X-class flare on October 3rd. So you see that this position of Mercury seems to correspond with big flare activity. We also had comet Shu Qinshan flying in between the Earth and the Sun at that moment in time, also provoking this sort of increased solar activity. And this is likely what we're going to see occur with interstellar object 3I Atlas as it passes by the solar system with a pretty close approach, cutting within the orbit of Mars. Now let's go to our next superior conjunction with Mercury. This is going to be right around here, and so we have this on February 9th. And while we did have an increase in solar flare activity as compared to the days and weeks surrounding this moment in time, we had a 7.7 M class flare on the 6th of February and a 7.3 M class flare on the 7th of February. So even this position slightly before that exact superior conjunction seems to correspond with enhanced solar activity. Let's go forward again to our next one. That is going to be in May, specifically around May 29th. We get that next superior conjunction of Mercury, and we see that we had a 1.1 X-class flare on the 25th, as well as a 9.4 M-class flare. And then on the 30th, just one day after that cazimi, we had an 8.2 M-class flare from the sun. So what's this next one going to look like? Well, we have to go all the way to September here, and that's going to be September 13th approximately. That's right in the middle of eclipse season. We also have the equinox coming up, and we have some pretty significant planetary geometry right during this window. You notice here this alignment: Neptune, Saturn, Earth, Sun, Mercury. So I think we're going to see a lot of solar activity at this moment in time. You also notice this Sun, Venus, Jupiter conjunction there. So this is looking like a very likely window, and I mention it because we're not that far away from this, just about 2 weeks, add a couple days to that. I think we're going to be seeing some big activity around this moment in time. One of the reasons why I have this theory, you could say, is because Mercury is very close to the sun. It has a very high orbital velocity, and these Birkeland currents that emit from the sun connect directly to Mercury. And it seems that when it's on the far side, it creates a larger electric circuit between Mercury, the sun, and Earth, which then provokes solar activity on the Earth-facing side. But because this is September 13th, for this Mercury cazimi, maybe it'll happen slightly before that, the 9th or the 10th, around there. So we could still have those big sunspots on the Earth-facing side, but we probably will need some other sunspots that follow up behind the big flare players right now, 4197, 4199, to cause this enhanced solar activity. And here we have our 131 angstrom view of the sun going from the 24th to today, the 26th of August, and we can see all this flare activity from our two main flare players here. We see 4199 very active, also 4197, big 4.5 M-class flare right there. We can give this a more in-depth look with this 2K view. What you'll see is that these two groups are very, very active, kind of have this sparkly electrical activity, which is generally a clear sign that they are building up to something. Notice that right there, it's continuing to be very active. But you'll also notice that they are flaring together sympathetically. So they are working together. Seems that they are part of a larger electric circuit close to the sun. And when you have these flows of energy through that electric circuit, specifically double layers in that circuit, so these voltage differentials that are quite steep, that seems to provoke explosive activity on the sun. There's some magnetic field dynamics involved there as well, of course, and then you get these big solar flares, these big boom shakalakas, as we like to call them. So these are just now rotating onto the Earth-facing side. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of activity from them, so we'll have to give them a close watch. But regardless of what they are doing, these other measures of solar activity are increasing. So we are seeing not only X-ray flux increase, but we are also seeing solar radio flux increase, and also the lower frequencies of solar radio flux. Let's check it out. Here we have our 10.7 centimeter radio flux, which is one of the best measures of overall solar activity. This is a 2.8 gigahertz frequency, and this is emitted by the sun. It's able to pass through our ionosphere and get picked up at the surface. So this is the same frequency that your Wi-Fi operates at. It's thermally expansive because it is in that microwave gigahertz band, and well, it's always being pumped out by the sun, but it increases pretty dramatically during solar maximum and decreases to a minimum during solar minimum. Here we see it was hovering around 140 to 160, going from July 15th here all the way to about the middle of August. And then we see it had this big steep drop there in the little bit later in the middle of August. That also corresponded with a big drop in sunspots. The sun was nearly devoid of sunspots for about a week. And now look at how it's been shooting up. Now our solar flux is 173. So we were having solar flux values of like 200, 220 earlier in the year. Also last year, we'll see if this continues to go up. I think it will, because these sunspots are still rotating into view and they are not Earth center direct and they are still growing. But this is a huge, huge, huge swing upwards in solar flux. This is being measured at the 10.7 centimeter wavelength. Again, one of these really good measures of solar activity, but there are other frequencies that the sun emits besides just this, and they have also been elevated. Let's check them out. Here we have a web article that I will link in the video description for you to read, but basically there are other ways to measure solar activity, and one of the ways to do this is via solar radio burst. And so there are different types. There's type 2, type 3, but what we've been seeing with this solar cycle, which is anomalous as compared to other solar cycles like solar cycle 24, 23, whatever, is that these type 2 solar radio bursts have been picked up in this 15 to 30 megahertz band. So normally they are not showing up at these lower frequencies that the sun does emit, but instead this solar cycle we have been seeing a lot of energy in that lower frequency band. So if we look at our overall 10.7 centimeter radio flux for solar cycle 25, it took a big drop recently over the past couple months. But with this information in mind, some of that solar energy output is actually shifted to lower frequencies. Here we see an example of a type 2 solar radio burst, and we see our megahertz frequency there going from, let's say 17 right there to 29. We see it's picking up really nicely in that lower frequency zone. We've been having a lot of energy come in at these lower frequencies, and anything in that megahertz to gigahertz range in general gets absorbed by different materials at the molecular and at the elemental level, like the atomic level, and it causes thermal expansion. It's how your microwave works. And so you would think that as a result of us being blasted with more of this megahertz and gigahertz frequency energy, there has been an increase in thermal expansion at the crustal layer. And that could explain why we're seeing so many earthquakes right now. Just the fact that we had that magnitude 8.8 megaquake off the coast of Kamchatka July 29th of this year means that this was the 6th biggest year for seismic activity in our recorded record with modern seismic observations, because that was the 6th strongest earthquake we've ever observed. 2025 has already been a massive year for overall earthquake energy release. You can measure this in like gigawatt or even terawatt hours. And well, 2025 isn't over. So we could see more big earthquakes. And I think this sort of enhanced microwave flux from the sun is causing some level of thermal expansion to the crust. And as a result, causing there to be greater seismic activity. And here we see the peak X-ray flux from that 4.5 M-class flare today at 5:25 a.m. Universal Time. So that is when all these highly vibrational light photons are hitting the Earth. This is the daylight side. You will also notice that we are in this S1 proton radiation storm. So at the moment of that flare, we were just getting to that S1 level. We weren't there 100% yet, but this is really showing that there's a tremendous amount of energy coming in right now from the sun and from our interplanetary environment. This is all charging up the Earth. And so we've begun this new wave of Earth charging after we've had some big releases like that magnitude 8.8 megaquake, like that 7.5 magnitude earthquake in the Drake Passage south of South America, in between South America and Antarctica. And now these new sunspot groups are rotating into view. And well, I think we have quite a show ahead of us for the rest of August. For September, because of that Mercury Cazimi eclipse season, equinox, a lot of big energies in September. And then in October, we have the main show as 3I Atlas gets very, very close to the sun. It has a very large complex dusty plasma coma surrounding it, which is electromagnetically active. That would be interacting with the heliospheric current sheet and overall the solar wind. And if it disrupts the larger electric circuit dynamics of interplanetary space in the inner solar system, that could provoke some really significant double-digit X-class flare solar activity like Oumuamua did in 2017. And we also had the strongest earthquake of 2017, a magnitude 8.2 in Mexico, one day before Oumuamua's perihelion. And so we'll just have to wait and see what happens between this dynamic of the planets and planetary geometry, interstellar object 3I Atlas, and solar cycle 25 maxima with renewed activity from the sun at this moment in time. But I think we are in for quite a show going all the way till the end of 2025. And one more plot to show you to kind of zoom out and give you the larger perspective is this solar and geomagnetic activity data plot provided by Solon.info. And this goes all the way back to September 2nd of 2024. And then it goes up to the present moment here on the right. And so we see quite a few things. We have our AP index at the bottom, a measure of geomagnetic volatility here on Earth. So all these spikes are effectively geomagnetic storms. Then we have our NOAA sunspot number there. In red, we see our 27-day average Wolf number, which is measuring sunspots there in this like magenta color. Then we also see here our 10.7 centimeter radial flux, and you see that oscillation that it has across time. This is a daily value. And then we see this burgundy line there is our 81-day average. Well, I really want you to focus here on the 10.7 centimeter radial flux. See how we are all the way up here in the 200s, even at one point spiking to 310 there beginning of October. Remember, that was that superior conjunction of Mercury with Shu Qin Shan as well, flying into the inner solar system, crossing through the ecliptic plane. Well, look at how solar flux has been decreasing, had a big drop off there in May when we had the lowest sunspot count for solar cycle 25 maximum yet at under 80. Then it was kind of stabilizing. It looks like now we are charging back up to some of these other values. We could be in for that double peak, which a lot of solar cycle maximums exhibit. They take a break in the middle and then they really surge back up for one final show before the descending phase begins. So we could see this roll over, but I think we're going to continue to see this go up because these sunspots have just rotated into view, and there's very likely more solar flux that's going to push out behind them in that zone just off the eastern limb, because that is where 3I Atlas is. And personally, I think the sun is actively working to wake up this interstellar visitor, because we know that vibration and energy and information, that is all consciousness, and there's a unique opportunity here for the sun to interact with an interstellar object which could have a very unique information and consciousness field to it, and so it's going to shoot a bunch of stuff out at it. Interstellar object 3I Atlas is also going to provoke this activity in kind of this bi-directional exchange, and so that is going to continue to hover off the back end of the eastern limb of the sun. But as it reaches its superior conjunction with the Earth on the 21st of October, it will be exactly on the opposite side of the sun. So expect a lot of solar flux to be created on the far side, which will then rotate into view on the Earth-facing side. And because it'll be created on the far side, it'll have time to grow, develop, and perhaps blast stuff our way once it's Earth-facing and direct. And here we have our 4K intensitygram to see these sunspot groups in action. You'll notice that the western side of the sun solar coordinate system is pretty devoid of sunspots. Then it really starts with 4191 there, right in the bullseye zone. So that could give us something just in the next 24, 36 hours, though it has been fairly quiet, but who knows, anything is possible. This core has been getting bigger. Here we have 4197. It is very large, two distinct clusters to it. We'll see if this intermediate zone fills in there, or if these kind of start to take on their own life as they detach from each other. These other sunspot groups are nearby, so we could start to see some larger interactions between them, but there is quite a bit of distance there. And then we have 4191 here, which is smaller, but it has been quite dynamic. So 4197 here has been the most dynamic active sunspot group, and it still has about 5 days until it reaches Earth center and direct. So I will keep you up to date every step of the way. A lot of new interesting information coming out on 3i Atlas. I'll keep you up to date on that as well. And I'm wishing each and every single one of you the best. Please take care of yourselves. Remember that there are all organic, natural, holistic wellness products available at earthevolution.com/store. You can also get some amazing leather shoe products. These are earthing shoes, boots, and sandals at wildfreeorganic.com/store. I provide all these holistic products for you to help balance and equalize your energies as we go through these waves of powerful energy now during solar cycle 25 maximum and this seismic wave and now this interstellar wave. So definitely prepare for it if you don't have any of these things yet. And as we say, quality is no mistake. So thank you all so much for watching. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. I'll see you all in the next video.